Hey, my friends, it's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Have you seen this kid? I think it's on TikTok. There's a kid who looks at whatever the most recent viral video or amazing human accomplishment that's making the rounds on Reddit or whatever. He looks at this, and then he goes and he duplicates the feat in very modest, understated terms, and then he just looks at the camera and shrugs like, I don't really see what the problem was here. Likewise, we got a passage in Matthew 21. I think, is it also verse 21? Yeah, it is. It starts in verse 21, where you get into this teaching of Jesus, where he makes this promise to the disciples about prayer and the miraculous power of God and the stuff that they're going to see and belief and how it all fits together. And then people look at this passage and they're like, dang, I mean, it looks like Jesus is saying that if you pray for stuff, like it is going to happen. You are in the driver's seat here. And then obviously people pray for stuff and the things don't always happen. And so what gives? Is Jesus wrong about things? Is Matthew making stuff up in the Bible? What kind of crisis are we trying to deal with here? Is the whole thing a fraud? Or is that religion or version of Christianity getting it wrong? Or is this other one enlightened and they know what to do and they have access to the power? You just got to pray better, pray harder. It's a surprisingly controversial passage, but much like the kid in the TikTok videos, it's like, I don't know that this one is actually that hard. And you and I have gone through the book of Matthew together, and I think we got everything we need to sort out this little mini controversy pretty quickly and pretty easily with what we've already looked at. So here's what we got. Matthew 21, we are getting into the super home stretch, high stakes part of the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus has made the trip to Jerusalem, and then he goes back out to Bethany, and then the next morning he's coming back into town. He sees a fig tree. He's like, I'm going to exercise my age-old right of fig conquest that's guaranteed in these cultures, and I'm going to eat some figs off this tree, but there are no figs on the tree. And so he curses the tree and says, may you never bear fruit again. And as you and I discussed over the last several conversations, it looks to me like that is maybe an allusion to what we see in stuff like the book of Hosea. Hosea involves a living metaphor of judgment against the northern kingdom of Israel. So it looks like here Jesus, by cursing this fig tree, is saying in a way that would pop to the original audience that he is rejecting, cursing the religious leadership that's putting a barrier between people and God because it's fruitless. The disciples are really interested in how the fig tree withered so quick, and that's where their brains go immediately. And so in verse 20, not really wanting to go down the road that you and I just went down with Old Testament stuff in 2 Kings and Hosea, they're still hung up on, yeah, but what about the tree? That used to be like the other thing, but now if you look right at it, you can see that it's all this other way now. That's just crazy. And so when the disciples saw this, they were amazed. How did the fig tree wither so quickly, they asked. And Jesus replied, and in doing so, he just rolls right with them. Like, all right, if this is where your head's at, let's just go right there and we'll tackle that instead of maybe the larger questions about the end of time and God's judgment and God's grace and all of that. And he says, I tell you the truth, if you have faith and don't doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea and it'll be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. All right, like I said, I don't think this one's this tough, so let's just tear into it and break it down. I tell you the truth, if you have faith and do not doubt, okay, well, what exactly does that mean? I mean, Thomas is going to doubt a little bit later on here. Peter doubted right after being a part of a miracle and started to fall into the Sea of Galilee. I mean, it seems like some degree of human frailty is the kind of thing that Jesus can and expects to work with in the process of all of this. So he doesn't really quantify like how much doubt is allowed or what kind of doubt. But it would seem like whenever we get to this question of belief in the New Testament, it is not a synonym for knowing all the things and perfect intellectual assent to all the right ideas. Belief in the New Testament also seems to not be a synonym for having no questions or wondering things about the motives of God or the work of God or how it all fits together. No, overwhelmingly, belief means, all right, I think God is going to do the things God said God was going to do. Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. It's a very old Bible characterization of belief. Belief means that you believe that Jesus is who Jesus says he is. I mean, that key confession of Christ from Matthew 16, I mean, that's belief. So if you have faith and you don't doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it'll be done. Well, the fig tree thing is new, and I suppose if we accept that the fig tree thing is the metaphor Jesus seemed to just explicitly assign to it, that being, this is a critique, a withering critique. Ha-ha! See what I did there? A withering critique of the religious leadership of the day. Well, then I suppose Peter and the disciples, in their belief, without doubt, about who Jesus is, just a few pages over here into the book of Acts. Wow, I got really close to it on my first couple of turns. That was really good winning Bible drills here. They walk in what is it? I mean, the first several chapters of Acts, they get dragged in front of that very cursed religious leadership in Acts chapter 4. And they stand right up there and basically in person call out the same stuff that Jesus is calling out here when he curses the fig tree. This is fruitless. You killed Jesus. This is on your hands. He's the Messiah, and you're persecuting us. They fire right back. So maybe there's fulfillment in that promise of Jesus about the fig tree part right there. But then the language gets familiar. You're going to say, go to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it will be done. Well, we already said stuff like that. This has come up. This is not new material for the disciples. Chapter 17 and verse something. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, why couldn't we drive out this demon? The very next anecdote after the transfiguration is this demon thing. They couldn't drive out the demon. And Jesus replies, because you have so little faith, I tell you the truth. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Well, now we're just playing chase the metaphor. Mustard seed, that rings a bell. Let me just turn a couple pages back here and go to the kingdom parable discourse of Matthew chapter 13. Verse 31 of Matthew chapter 13, he told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it's the smallest of all your seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. Okay, so the kingdom parables discourse, this is the one where the disciples and everybody's still trying to figure out what this thing is going to look like, and Jesus is like, here you go. The question people had is, how come the kingdom doesn't look the way we would expect a normal kingdom to look? Like, how big is this going to get? How fast? And Jesus uses this example of a mustard seed in this little micro parable to say it's going to be small at first, but you know how mustard seeds are. They're little and then they get gigantic and wield massive influence. Now we're working the other way back through the equation to where we just were in chapter 17. Jesus is still pointing toward something very, very little on their part, the smallest imaginable thing, but no doubt drawing on the same ideas that he was pointing to before. He's saying that thing grows into something much bigger that affects more things. Fast forward back to 21 in the passage that we're looking at today. You can say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it'll be done. I think all three of these little quick teachings of Jesus fit together. Of course, this looks humanly impossible. Of course, it looks like this could never be done. And by this, we don't just mean the miraculous stuff like a mountain into the sea, but how about a metaphor of a mountain into the sea? Like, say, the entire religious establishment that is driving a wedge between the people who are seeking God and the knowledge of God. That is a monolith. You couldn't touch it. You couldn't do anything with it. If anything is a threat to it, you just crucify that thing or stone it. Something we're going to see happen in the ensuing months as it unfolds from this chronological moment forward in Matthew chapter 21. This mountain has the ability to kill and destroy people. So before you even get into the miraculous, there's something that's maybe even more difficult to conceive of for the original audience than the miraculous, and that is what it would look like for the kingdom thing to take root and even to displace the world system religion thing that had taken root and that seemed like this unconquerable, unclimbable, let alone unmovable mountain. And here Jesus is like, yeah, it's impossible for people, but it's possible for God. And he wraps it up. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. And given what we've already looked at and already talked about here, this is the part that I think is really easy. Clearly, this cannot be a guarantee to say anything you can think of. They can just say it toward God and believe real hard, and then the thing happens. I mean, if that were the case, once again, I would be 6'6" and a model and the best athlete on planet Earth. But those things have not come to pass, despite the sincerity of my Christian faith and my repeated childhood prayers for such things. No, it's come to pass as what thankfully you cannot see before you right now as I talk into this microphone. But think about it. I mean, what are the parameters to prayer? Well, we just go back to the part where Jesus teaches everybody how to pray. And here he is going right through the front door in Matthew chapter 6. This then is how you should pray. You know this one, I bet. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. So you're in charge of everything. Your name is revered. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So it's not really about what I want anyway. It's just whatever you want. That is proper prayer. I'm for whatever you are for, and that is it. Give us today our daily bread. You provide for me. I don't provide for me. You're the ultimate provider. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. If we want your grace and forgiveness, which we so desperately need, and for which the debt is so enormously grand, we have to be quick to part ways with the little debts we imagine other people owe us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. You're the one who's ultimately the protector. You're the one who takes care of your subjects. The Lord's Prayer is a prayer of bending the knee entirely before the will of God and saying, you're in charge of everything. Well, if that then is how we should pray, it is impossible to imagine that this other teaching somehow supersedes it or replaces that teaching to say, well, pray in your own will for whatever things you want, and as long as you super mean it and don't doubt, you're going to get it. Reason, biblical interpretation, and the history of everything says that isn't how it works. Instead, the obvious parameters on this teaching are the will of God. The idea is that through prayer and through following Jesus, people become kingdom subjects of the kingdom king, and get to a place where they sincerely mean, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. In other words, whatever you want is what I want, and therefore prayer operates within those boundaries. If a subject then prays for something that God chooses not to grant, what can be concluded is that in the sovereign, eternal, providential will of God, what you wanted was not his will. And even though it might have been a reasonable request, or even something that we could imagine being very, very helpful for his redemptive project, it was not the will of God, and therefore it was not realized. On to new territory, mañana. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.